All right, finna go to get it started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of a Champ podcast, episode 146. For today's topic, we're going to be discussing. Man, why do I keep doing that, man? We're going to be discussing an interesting topic that I have indeed discussed before, but I wanted to go ahead and give you new insight that I've personally learned and plenty of good information that definitely can help most people out. Unfortunately, like I said, most people just don't. Quite frankly, they're not very good conversationalists, and I'm a person who isn't the best conversationalist, but at the same time, I'm definitely better than a lot of people that I've talked to. So, with that being said, I'm qualified enough to talk about this shit. So, if you are in here, make sure to go ahead and leave a like, and make sure to go ahead and leave a comment. A few things I want to mention before I go and get started. Make sure to go ahead and follow me on TikTok, just Life of a Champ podcast on TikTok, as well as make sure to go ahead and follow me um, on Rumble as well. Rumble's an app that I'm trying to get more followers in, and I'll be doing live streams on there as well. Also, go ahead and leave a follow on Twitch as well. If you know what Twitch is, make sure you go and tap in. If not, you definitely need to do some research on that because that's definitely one of the best streaming platforms that exists right now. And then also make sure you go ahead and leave a like on my YouTube Shorts as well as my YouTube clips. If you can't catch a full podcast or for whatever reason, don't never catch it live. Make sure you go ahead and tap in with that. Still going to be the good information that I'm speaking about on the podcast, but it's just going to be in short form. But to get into it, right? How to become a better conversationalist. Now, this is a topic that I feel like not a lot of people consciously like. They don't consciously think to actually try to get better at this skill. But quite frankly, it is a skill, and quite frankly, it is a necessary, very very necessary skill. I would say it's probably within the top five most necessary skills that you possibly can um, build and that you should build because you're going to use it every single day. You're never not going to use it really. So the fact that people even lack this and go their entire life without even consciously giving this any thought, really, second thought, is honestly a shame because then you see the result of that. They're not able to maintain conversation. So therefore, if you're not able to maintain conversation, there's going to be a limited amount of opportunities that are going to be out there for you just because you haven't put yourself in a position to be good at conversation. But maybe there was a certain person that you were supposed to meet if you were better at making conversation, and you never met that person. You never had that interaction, uh, just because you limited yourself. You never actually took this serious. So this is why I personally take it serious. And like I said, I'm not the greatest when it comes to conversation, but I do recognize all the flaws in which people make during conversation, and I try my best to go ahead and avoid those as well. And yeah, so creating conversation is one thing, maintaining conversation is a completely other thing, but nonetheless, you need to figure out how to do these both. So, like I said, creating conversation and maintaining conversation. I would say for creating conversation, this is going to be just they're just the little things, right? There could be a little thing that you either compliment, there could be a thing that you relate to. That's going to be the easiest conversation starters that could ever exist. Compliments for sure, and like I said, if there's something that they're wearing that you relate with, that you can talk about, and that's I feel like that's something that a lot of people get wrong when they start conversations is they don't have a point of like making a reason, and truly a lot of it is making a reason. There's really no reason for you to go up to anybody really and start a conversation with them. You have to literally create a reason that's relevant enough for you to talk about and for them to actually care for it to be something that you should actually do. So with that being said, that's going to be some of the ways in which I would go ahead and advise you to go ahead and create a conversation. And maintaining a conversation is a completely different other thing. If I had to give you some quick advice about that, for maintaining conversation, this is going to consist of talking about certain topics or asking certain questions that are going to reap you the most out of the interaction. So maybe this is asking a question about their family. Maybe this is asking a question about the things that they like to do on their free time. Maybe this is a question about the dreams that they will dreams or the future that they will pursue, right? Those are all going to be very, very good conversation maintainers. I'll say that, and I do believe that if you're a person who's able to ask very, very good questions, you're going to be able to maintain conversation very, very easily, and you're going to also be able to gauge the conversation very, very easily as well, right? A lot of people are not able to do this. They kind of get caught up in the silence. They're not completely content with there not being anything to say. All right, they don't allow themselves to even think about what could be potentially said next. They just think about the silence, and that's not going to bode very very well within a conversation. So with that being said, you must recognize that and try to avoid it as much as you possibly can, or like I said, recognize the vulnerabilities and the insufficiencies of all the conversations that you've had or haven't had, or maybe you've observed that particularly didn't end well, or maybe they weren't maintained good, or maybe they didn't start very good, right? With all those things, if you're able to consciously work on these things, and it is something that you should consciously work on, because, like I had mentioned, most people just truly lack this ability, or at the very, I won't even say lack this ability, but they lack the ability to do it at a high level, right? And if you look at anybody that you respect, truly respect, they're going to be good at this, right? And with that being said, you should strive to be good at this, because, quite frankly, like I had mentioned, all the people that you look up to, all the people that you admire, all the people that you watch on social media are able to do this, and maybe you could potentially do it better than them. That's definitely a potentiality for sure. So you definitely gotta think of it as that, and if you work on it, you're literally outworking, and that's a pod anyways, right? You're literally outworking, I would say, at least 90% of people, because 90% of people don't even have it as a conscious thought. So yeah, there you go. Um, hmm. And okay, this is going to be a good conversation right here, and I would say that this is going to be one of those things that is a little bit. This might offend some people, but I do believe that this is going to contribute to becoming a good conversationalist. Is just having things to talk about. So with that being said, no one wants to have a conversation with somebody who's boring. So if you're a person who's boring right now, you need to become more interesting, right? When I say become more interesting, there's a few ways in which you can do it, right? You could become interesting by being well read or well researched on many different topics. That's going to be my best advice to become more interesting, right? Or maybe this is creating status for yourself. That's also going to be an interesting conversation at the very least. Even if you're not very good at making conversation, it's at least a conversation starter, something that people can relate to or want to relate to, with that. So yeah, I would just say it comes down to being interesting, man. If you're not an interesting person, why would anybody want to maintain and have a conversation with you? If you're trying to attract women, and quite frankly none of them want to talk to you, it's probably because you're not interesting, right? You're not well read, you're not well researched, and if you talk to anybody who's really good at making conversation, they're going to have extended conversation that exists beyond what they can comprehend in the current moment. They could literally branch out to many different conversations if they would like. And I feel like if you're able to have this in your toolkit, right, or whatever, your tool belt, whatever you want to say, right, you're going to be in a good position when it comes to trying to maintain conversation. And this is going to be a skill that isn't exactly working consciously on speech. This is going to be a skill that I feel like anybody and everybody should be working towards. If you're not an interesting person, you should be working to be more interesting. And if you are an interesting person, you need to be working on how to maintain being an interesting person, as well as how do you increase your level of interest, or your appeal of level of interest to other people. And like I said, it's almost going to be one of these indirect things that you can work on that's going to inevitably help your speech in the end. And I feel like there's going to be a few points that I make on today's podcast that definitely is going to go hand in hand with that, where you have it. I'm giving you advice, but I'm not particularly giving you advice specifically on conversation. It's just around the topic of conversation, which will end up leading you back to the conversation, right? The root of the problem, or the root of the potential opportunity. I'll say that. So yes, become more interesting. And I feel like also having a good understanding of societal, like something that's socially relevant, is also going to be good for conversation as well. Let's just say, I don't know, there's something going on in Hawaii, and you feel like you can talk about it at least a little bit, right? That's gonna be something that I would say is socially relevant. But what it comes down to is being well researched. I feel like that's gonna ultimately come down to that main topic of being well researched. Um, like I said, anybody who's been interesting, any person that you've had talked to in the past who's been interesting in conversation, they either had experiences, they were either well researched or well read, to the point where they could speak on these certain things. And speech is a completely different realm. I made a previous podcast regarding speech. So if you want to go ahead and look into that, I would definitely go ahead and look into that for sure. But I'll be talking a little bit about speech later on in the podcast. But nonetheless, be an interesting person. Everybody wants to have a conversation with somebody who's interesting, and nobody wants to have a conversation with somebody who's truly not. So it's one of those indirect things, like I had mentioned. And I feel like, with this being said, in order to have an interesting conversation with somebody, in order to become a better conversationalist, you truly need to be able to have some opinions on something. You can't be opinionless, right? I feel like this is the misconception that a lot of people have. Do you like having conversations with people who are truly opinionless? Probably not. Probably not. So you need to be able to come up to a conclusion, and maybe it's open ended at the very least. Hopefully, it's open ended, where you have an opinion, you're willing to not necessarily change your opinion, but you're open to discussion about something that is contrary to what you believe in, right? Those are going to be some of the people that are going to be very, very good at conversation, and somebody who's worth having a conversation with. You can't have a conversation with somebody who doesn't have an opinion at all, and it'd be like a super interesting conversation, right? You want to be able to take you want somebody that's going to be able to take a stance, and then not, you can either agree with that stance or you can not agree with that stance, and I feel like that's going to be much better for conversation for sure. And with that being said, when you have a opinion on something, you're going to be better able to explain your side of it. So maybe you have a few opinions right now that maybe not a lot of people agree with, but if you want people to agree with you, you need to be able to explain that to someone exactly the way in which you think, and you're going to be in a better position because of that, right? I see a lot of people, they have opinions on certain things, or maybe they've heard something, maybe they have adopted that same opinion, and now when they have a conversation with somebody, they don't have it thought out enough, and therefore they lose. Let's just say they are right. Let's just say you are right, and you don't have it thought out enough, or you haven't thought it out well enough for you to be able to explain it to somebody else. You're still going to lose. You're still going to lose the argument. You could truly be right, but if you're not able to, explain that to somebody, if you're not able to convey exactly what's going on within your own mind to someone else, you could still potentially lose, man. He ain't pretty sure what's happening in, man. You already know what time it is, man. Before the workout, come on now. He had to get his mind gains in before his gains, man. Come on now. But yeah, like I said, make sure you're an interesting person. Make sure you're well researched. And like I said, with that being said, if you're able to have an opinion, people are going to. Um, okay, your voice is coming. All right, so there's really nothing I can do with that, so we're gonna keep rocking it out. All right, I appreciate it for letting me know, though. I appreciate letting me know. But getting back into it, right? With that being said, like I had mentioned earlier in this specific podcast, your ability to ask questions is definitely going to play a huge role as well. And more importantly, timely questions. You can't just ask a super deep question to somebody in the very beginning because they're not going to be comfortable. You're not going to have built a level of trust and comfortability. And if you have a lack of trust and comfortability, there's going to be certain questions that are obviously, if you're socially calibrated, not worth asking in that current moment, right? They're not going to be willing to answer. They're going to be a little bit resistant. And if you're trying to build comfortability, which anyone and everyone should be trying to build a level of comfortability within conversation, then you need to know exactly when to ask questions and when not to ask questions. And of course, this is going to be a lot of assuming, right? Um, Quite frankly, that is going to be a lot of conversation in general. Is going to be a lot of assuming that you are and that person is willing to progress within that conversation to have another maybe deeper level of conversation, right? This is something that I can't really teach. You can't really teach socialization and social cues and things like that. You can kind of, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. But you either know or you don't know, and if you don't know, then hopefully figure it out one of these days. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, ask timely questions because quite frankly, asking timely questions could potentially be everything within a conversation, and it could literally either make the conversation great or it's going to make the conversation very, very bad, very, very quickly. Um, yeah, and another thing I want to mention as well is if one recommendation that I would definitely recommend to a lot of people who are trying to be very good at conversation is you need to be able to ask conversation or you need to be able to ask questions that are going to be super open ended, and allow them to kind of answer it exactly the way in which they want to answer it. And with that being said, you're going to be able to get kind of more of a view of how their mind truly works, because of the simple fact that you leave it up for their interpretation. And then from there you could truly make assumptions, reasonable assumptions, based off of the way in which they went ahead and answered that question. So I could give you guys a few examples. If you guys want a few examples of or questions that are very, very good for conversation, make sure go ahead and leave it in the comments. But ultimately, what I think it comes down to is it being timely, knowing when and how to ask the question, knowing if that person is comfortable enough to answer the question. Those are all going to be things that you kind of have to assume, but hopefully you can recognize that, because if you cannot recognize that, you're going to struggle. And like I said, you can't really teach. You can't really teach. What is a word that I've used always for this? Let me think for a second. You can't always teach being socially. Why am I blanking right now? Give me one second. Give me one second, man. You can't teach. I don't have a brain fart right now. Yeah, essentially what I'm trying to say is the social cues, right? The socialization of a conversation of a person, you can't really necessarily teach that. It's something that you're going to have to kind of be a conscious observer of and actually build on your own. But honestly, I would say a lot of people they do lack that, and especially a lot of men they do lack that. So if you're a man who lacks that, you need to have more conversations with people, and you need to get out there because quite frankly, you being closed off is not going to be an ideal. Even if you are well researched and well read and semi interesting, if you're not able to build that skill of having conversation and expressing those certain things, then maybe you're going to be lacking, and that's truly not ideal. It's always uncomfortable having those people who are a little too open when you first meet them, telling you their darkest secrets and you just met. And that's another thing. That's another thing. And I feel like that's a very good point that you just brought up. Part of it, and I do believe it's two parts. Part of it is one, them being comfortable enough to actually express that, and two, them being not conscious enough to know when to actually have that type of conversation, right? There's a lot of people that I've met. Okay, first I want to say this, and this is something that I've observed with talking to a bunch of women that I've not a bunch of women, but a decent amount of women, right? I have this very very good ability to make them feel very very comfortable within a conversation, so that maybe they'll expose something to me that they necessarily wouldn't expose to someone else very early on. And with that being said, that is partially them being comfortable with me, but that is also partially them not knowing. I would say not knowing them like Jaden had mentioned, just being a little too open, right? So it's gonna be a little bit of mix of those, but quite frankly, what I will say is, don't be one of those people who expose too much early on, right? Because people can be people can view that as very very negative, right? I've had conversations with people where the first time I met them, they're telling me their entire life story, right? And I'm just kind of just like, whoa, like I've had people like literally start crying the first time I met them, start crying based off of them telling me their entire life story. I'm like, I don't even know you like that, but you trust me. You obviously trust me enough, or you're just that open, or you just need to have that conversation, and you just feel like it's okay to have that conversation. So it is what it is, right? But I do believe that there's going to be something to be said. That there's going to be something to be said about law number 4 of the 48 laws of power, which is always say less than necessary. um, Not to say that you withhold information, but quite frankly, you should know exactly when and where to expose certain types of information. I want to say expose it. I don't really mean it in a negative connotation, but just when you're willing to have that conversation or not, you should be a little bit. I would say a little bit more passive than aggressive, like some other people, for sure, for sure. So, like I said, the timing is going to be literally everything. Don't be one of those people who's exposing too much too early on, because that shit's just what could be perceived as weird. Some people are okay with it, and most of the time, I would say if somebody's expressing something very, very early on, I would say most of the time I am okay with it. There's gonna be those few conversations that are a little bit worth you know keeping on the back burner before you go ahead and expose it to somebody. But it is what it is. But yeah, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Right? Don't out here expose your deepest and darkest secrets to people who don't even know you like that. So it's a level you need to be able to build a level of trust, right? You need to build a level of trust. Hopefully, I don't necessarily feel like I need to explain that, but quite frankly, I do. I do. There's going to be a lot of people that don't know that, so definitely, that's definitely worth mentioning. And one thing I want to mention with that as well, when it comes back to the overall point of becoming a better conversationalist, I feel like more people need to be just curious, truly curious, and that's where the questions come in, right? I feel like you need to create. This is something I would recommend for everybody to do. Create good conversation starters. Create questions. Like make a list of questions that you think are very very good conversation maintainers, right? Where you can get to know somebody by just asking a few questions, right? I've been able to do this time and time again, whether I'm meeting a woman or whether I'm meeting a man, where I can get to know their character very quickly. I can get to know how their mind works very very quickly by just asking maybe 5 questions, if that. And it's not even necessarily like I'm like playing 20 questions with them. It's more of like it just genuinely flows with the conversation, and yeah, that's what I will say for sure, for sure. But you need to be naturally curious, curious in the sense by yourself, right? With being well read or well researched, or understanding something that is socially relevant and also relevant to the conversation, as well as just be curious enough about people, right? I'm truly a curious person when it comes to that, and I attach that to my identity. When I meet somebody new, I'm definitely curious to get to know them and kind of, like I said, know how their mind works. That's something that always particularly interests me. And by you being curious, hopefully that's going to naturally guide the conversation into a direction that's going to be favorable for both of you guys. And if it is, then I would say it's going to be up for sure. It's going to be up. The vibes are going to be up for sure. And I want to kind of reiterate on this point a little bit. I've mentioned it just a little bit ago, but I feel like this is super, super important when it comes to conversation as well. Your ability to make people comfortable as soon as you can is absolutely necessary and will dictate whether you're good at maintaining conversation or not, right? If people are very, very like, I'm not gonna say like not open with you, like if they're very closed off to you, it's not gonna be very good for conversation. But if you are a person that's able to get to the point where people are very, very quick to get very comfortable within conversation with you, you're going to be able to that's a skill. That is truly a skill. And what I will say with that as well is most people like to talk about themselves. If you ask questions and if you're curious, that's, you're gonna be in a good position to make them feel comfortable, and hopefully you feel comfortable enough as well. But what I will say is you should probably, I'm gonna say this, you guys can take it for what it is, but the person you're talking to should definitely be a little bit more comfortable with talking about certain things than you should be with them. If that makes sense. And if you're able to do that within any and every interaction, you're going to be in a good position. Quite frankly, like I said, I'm definitely very, very, I'm unconsciously good at doing this. I don't like, oh, how can I like, no, I'm not like that. I'm not planning like that. It just kind of happens to be that way. I'm just talking about it, right? But I'm not like devious in my own mind, like, oh, how can I make this person more comfortable, right? It's more like it just happens, right? So with that being said, your ability to do that is going to say a lot about your character. It's going to say a lot about your ability to be social and your social it's gonna say a lot about your social cues and rather understanding them and other people as well. Man, there's that one word that's still messing me up, man. And that's what it is. Is a lot of people are not socially calibrated. That's what it is. That's what it is. So if you're a person that isn't socially calibrated, you need to figure out a specific way, and obviously that's through having conversation that's going to help that out. Because quite frankly, it's kind of hard. It's kind of awkward if you're a person that is really not socially calibrated. So definitely, if you're try your best to become better at that, and if you're better at that, you're going to be in a good position, man. Because, like I said, I understand not a lot of people are truly socially calibrated enough, which is why I feel the need to make conversations like this in the first place. But nonetheless, if you're like that, there's not a problem with you being like that right now. Now, in 2 years from now, if you're still like that, then it's a problem, right? But at the very least, you're doing your due diligence to go ahead and learn what you need to learn, and then hopefully be better because of that. But like I said, in 2 years, if you watch this podcast and you're not a better conversationalist in 2 years, you failed yourself and you failed the world. I'll say that. So don't fail yourself and don't fail the world. That's for sure. And one thing I want to mention as well, when it comes to becoming a better conversationalist, and this is going to refer back to the thing that I'd mentioned earlier with you having your own opinions and you being able to speak on these certain things. If you're a person who is consuming so much content, but you're not even having your own thoughts, it's gonna be a little bit of a roadblock in conversation, right? Or at the very least, everybody knows there's certain types of people who literally only talk about shit that they've seen on social media. They have no actual thoughts of their own. It's all, well, yeah, they'll talk about it like, oh, where'd you hear that from? Oh yeah, I heard this from social media. Like, you got to be able to have your own independent thought outside of social media, right? Unfortunately, not a lot of people have these. Hold up, man, bro. Yeah, so that's what I will say. Unfortunately, not a lot of people. Yeah, I'm just gonna move on. I'm just gonna move on. Please just have your own thoughts. Figure out a way for you to go ahead and, like I said, simply just have your own thoughts, man. Because quite frankly, if you're a person that's just basing all their conversation based off of social media, there's something to be said about those certain people who truly do not have their own independent thought. And at least for me, I can completely tell. I can completely tell when somebody's just purely just a product of exactly what they consume, as opposed to um, what they actually think about, right? It's a whole different way of being. That's all I'm gonna say. It's a whole different way of being, and either you know or you don't know. And if you know, don't be like that person, man. And one thing I want to mention as well. This is also going to help you become a better conversationalist. And this is something that I feel like a lot of people can truly resonate with. They're not based. Come on now, you already know what time it is, man. You already know what time it is, AJ. this is going to be something that I feel like a lot of men truly, come across within their dating life. And this is something that I'm going to recommend for you to go ahead and avoid as much as you possibly can. This is going to be understand when you're doing the most within a conversation and when you're carrying a conversation, right? Maybe you're asking too many questions. Maybe she's not giving you the same energy, or maybe that person is not giving you the same energy or the same quality of responses that you are. And with that being said, in those certain types of situations, which they will exist within your life, where people are not, they're not providing as much value to the conversation as you are providing value to the conversation. And with those type of people, you must just take a step back. You must refrain from having the level of conversation in which you were having, and you must match that person's energy. I feel like not enough people talk about that certain thing when it comes to conversation, is because there's going to be moments where you are carrying a conversation, and quite frankly, no one wants to carry a conversation, right? Unfortunately, I'm probably a victim of this a little bit too much with carrying conversation because I'm a person who's a good conversationalist. But with becoming a good conversationalist, you should know the cues, you should know the position exactly in which you are in when you are actually just carrying a conversation. Obviously, you should be closer to 50-50. Obviously, if you're a good conversationalist, it's probably going to be a little bit more than just, you're probably going to have a little bit more than 50% of the conversation. But with that being said, you can tell if a person's not maintaining the same energy in which you're maintaining to the conversation. They're either number one, aren't interested, and that's okay. Just have a conversation with somebody who's more interested in the type of conversation in which you're giving. Or two, which is more the most likely scenario, is they just suck at having conversation. That's what it comes down to, right? Both are going to result in the same thing, which is going to be stepping away from the conversation. That's pretty much what it comes down to. It's going to be a little bit of a pullback. It's going to be a little bit of pullback of your energy, pullback of your time, attention, and all that, right? But yeah, like I said, if you see yourself carrying a conversation, it's going to be one of these two things. Like I said, either they truly aren't interested, right? Or two, they just suck at having conversation, and truly, that's pretty much what it's going to be most of the time. Most people truly suck at conversation, and that's just what it is. But yeah, with that being said, yeah, if you're a person that struggles with this, I want you to go ahead and leave in the comments. If you're a person who has any suggestions or things that you think are relevant to bring up within this type of conversation, make sure you go ahead and leave in the comments. I appreciate it. But yeah, I appreciate everyone. Shout out to the guy on Twitch. Appreciate for tapping in. He said hi. What's up, my man? What's up, my man? If you're on Twitch, let me know in the chat as well. I'm definitely checking both the chats, so say what's good for sure. But like I said, you can contribute to the podcast. So if you're watching this, don't be a person who's boring and just watching. Actually contribute, man. Actually contribute. All right, all right. And one thing I want to mention with becoming a better conversationalist is there's two types of conversations that do exist. There's obviously going to be the deep intellectual conversations that do exist, and then there's going to be the very surface level conversation. This is going to be the hi, how are you doing? Just the intro essentially. And I would say, unfortunately, most conversations never make it past that superficial beginning part. But nonetheless, you need to know how to do both of these things. You should be striving to be a person who thrives at doing both of these things. A person who can maintain very, very good small talk, as well as when everybody are sitting down at a table and having a very, very intellectual, deep conversation. You're going to be a person that's going to be contributing to that type of conversation. You need to learn how to do both of these things, because if you're lacking on one, if you're a person who's really, really good at having conversation, just small talk conversation, when you guys actually sit down and have a longer conversation that's longer than, let's just say, 20 minutes long, you're going to be able to see your true colors. And no one wants to be that person that truly doesn't have any, I would say, extra ammo when it comes to conversation, right? Those people are just boring essentially. And then also, with that being said, when it comes to a person that's very good at making good deep intellectual conversation, if you're a person who's not able to be, a person's going to be able to put themselves in a position even to have that type of conversation because you're not very good at the intro, the small talk, or maybe that even makes you feel uncomfortable. Um, yeah, you're gonna be in a difficult position because you're not even gonna be able to show off your ability to even have good conversation because you still lack at the end of the day. So everybody should be striving to be better at both of those things. And if you're a person that is struggling with one or struggling with both, you need to go ahead and do your due diligence. Have more conversations, because if not, then you're gonna be lacking. I'm telling you. All right, let's see what KJ has to say. What topics are we at? I'm joining for a little. You're just gonna have to watch, man. That's all I'm gonna say, man. Getting to the next thing. This is something that I feel like everyone should unconsciously do. This is something that I've unconsciously done for a while now. When it comes to having conversation and becoming a good conversationalist, you must have conversations with people who are better at having conversations than you are, right? So I would stress you to strive to have more conversations with people who are better than you at conversation, right? And truly be a person who's in the conversation and who's slightly out of the conversation enough to observe how to become better at that conversation. How can you emulate that person that you're talking to? What are the certain things that this person does very, very good, and what are certain things that this person does very, very poorly, right? Obviously, you want to observe and avoid the moments in which they're not very good, and you need to apply that to yourself, right? Avoid that for your own self, and you want to go ahead and make note of the certain things that they're very, very good at, and try to emulate them even within that specific conversation that you're having right then and there. If you're a person that's able to do that and able to still maintain presence within the conversation, you're going to be in a good position. And truly, hopefully, you can take something from that conversation after the conversation is over, right? So I'm a person who definitely loves to have good conversations. This is why I made the podcast in the first place. And with that being said, I'm able to observe certain things, and maybe it's a certain type of phrase, or maybe it's a certain type of conversation, or maybe it's a certain type of question that this person's um, asking that I truly like and admire. That is something I'm going to try to emulate my own personal self, and that's something that I feel like everybody should do a little bit more. Is take what you can and leave what you actually can leave, right? Yeah. Are there any challenges or icebreakers that I can do in public in my I'm gonna say, bro, you just need to have the conversations, bro. That's all I'm gonna say, bro. Like, I would say there's not a perfect phrasing. That's something that a lot of people get wrong within like approaching women, things like that. There's nothing that you're going to be able to say that's going to be like, wow, that's really gonna stand out. What it comes down to within icebreakers and things like that, it's going to be the tonality and confidence that you come with. That's it. You can say the goofiest thing ever, as long as you say it with the right tonality and the right amount of confidence. You're going to be able to you're going to be able to leverage very, very easily. You're going to have a lot of leverage within the conversation very, very easily. I'll say that. But are there any challenges or icebreakers that I can do in public to break my fear of conversations with women? It's a fear. Here's the thing: you recognize it as a perceived fear. You must understand that this is just a woman, this is just a person, and this is just a conversation. It's not that difficult. It's truly not that difficult, and it shouldn't even be like a, oh my god, like, well, it's just get rid of all that notion, man. Get rid of all that notion. You're a man that's working on himself, and with that being said, you shouldn't be scared to have a conversation with somebody who's probably not even going to work on themselves as much as you are. I feel like that's something that a lot of people get wrong within the self development community as well. Is like, if you're a person that works on themselves, you're probably going up to a woman who probably hasn't put as much work in as you have. So if anybody should be nervous for the conversation, it shouldn't be you. It should be them. So that's what I have to say for that for sure. But obviously, you have to be the one that initiates it. That's completely fine. But at the same time, there's never going to be a perfect phrase, a perfect conversation starter. There's not going to be any of these things, right? What you need to do is figure out what works and what doesn't work. And the only way you can figure out what works is if you go through the moments in which things don't work. And of course, those are going to be a plenty of awkward conversations to be had. But maybe you need to have those certain awkward conversations to learn from your experiences. Maybe that's exactly what's needed, right? Because I can tell you all of all the icebreakers and all the good things to start with. And with that being said, if you still don't come up with the right amount of confidence and the right tonality, you're still gonna fail. So that's why I say, when it comes to those certain things, the tonality in which you speak and the confidence in which you come up and present yourself with is going to matter ultimately over anything. And these are going to be the subtle things, and I think it's worthy of mentioning these things, right? These are going to be the nonverbal communication. That's going to be another huge part of becoming a good conversationalist, is recognizing things like body language, recognize things like eye contact, recognize things like just posture, things like that. If you're able to recognize these certain things and being a conscious observer of these things, you're going to be in a good position, because you're going to know when somebody's open to having a conversation with you. You're going to know when somebody wants to avoid having conversation with you. You're going to be able to kind of see an insight, truly, within that type of conversation, that, maybe that person is even unconscious of. Maybe they're doing something that, let's just say they're nervous, and you can kind of tell they're nervous because maybe they're not maintaining eye contact. Maybe their speech is very, very quick and very, very short, right? And maybe their body language is maybe a little bit more closed off. Maybe they're crossing their arms. There's little things you can notice, and that's going to help you become a little bit more socially aware, I guess. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I can teach it a little bit, right? It's going to come down to you recognizing the nonverbal cues that could suggest a whole lot without even having to say anything at all, and that's definitely going to help you for sure, for sure. Get yourself up to date on the current events and interesting topics. This can at least get you started, so you can have the icebreakers in conversation. That's going to be good. That's going to be a good point. Shout out to Graham, appreciate it. But yeah, that's a very, very good point when it comes to conversation. It's something that I mentioned a little bit earlier, but nonetheless, it really needs to be mentioned again, and that applies exactly to the question that he had asked. But um, yeah, being a person who's interesting, just being a person who's interesting to have conversation with, who knows things, and who truly has something to say as opposed to not. Listen and respond. If it lets them know that you're engaged and present. Yeah, that's very, very good as well. And one thing with that being said, you can kind of tell when somebody is engaged or not when they're able to incorporate exactly what you say within conversation. So that shows them a lot that you're actually attentive to the conversation. And yeah, the way that I would do this, let's just say you're having a conversation about um, sports or something. I don't even know. Let me think. Let me think of a better example. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to give you a specific example, right? But what I will say though is this: is when you're having conversation with somebody, let's just say you guys have two opinions or two points of views, right? They're going to give their point of view, and then which is obviously going to give you some leverage if you can get them to speak first, right? Obviously, you need them to be interested in even having the conversation in the first place. But let's just say you do that, right? You observe if you let them speak first, you let them give their point of view on a certain topic, and then from there you can give your own point of view. And while you're giving your own point of view, you can mention certain things that they said within them giving their own point of view. And when you're able to do that and also add your own personal touch to it and give your own opinion on it, you're going to put yourself in a position where they recognize that you're engaged, you're very attentive to their own conversation, and it's going to make them feel like you're actually listening as opposed to just expressing your own opinion and not even actually recognizing their opinion for what it was. Because people want to be acknowledged. People truly want to be acknowledged, and I'm sure you've had a conversation with somebody who truly didn't make you feel acknowledged, and you felt like you were talking to a brick wall. You felt like you were just speaking, and they weren't truly listening to you. They were just listening to respond, as opposed to uh, they were instead of listening to actually like have a good conversation, have a element of a good conversation. But nonetheless, yeah, AJ is completely right with that. AJ is completely right with that for sure, for sure. Oh yeah, so that was the next thing I was going to get into. Yeah, understand social cues, like I mentioned, eye contact, body language. Like I say, especially open and closed body language. That's going to be very, very key as well. Um, Another thing would be voice tonality. There's going to be a certain voice tonality where you can tell somebody's not interested, and there's going to be a certain voice tonality when you can tell somebody is truly interested in you, right? Whether this is another man or another woman, whatever it is, you're going to be able to tell very, very quickly, or at least hopefully tell very, very quickly. And one thing I want to mention with this as well is like there's going to be certain things within a conversation that I truly can't even exactly express on this at this specific podcast, because it's something that you're going to have to go out and try to have conversations and figure it out on yourself, right? But nonetheless, hopefully I'm giving you certain things to be conscious of beforehand, so you can go ahead and come in with a maybe more knowledge or more acknowledgement or more conscious thoughts of, which is going to put you in a good position to have a better conversation, right? That's all I'm trying to do at the end of the day. But if you are in here, appreciate you guys for stopping by. Make sure to leave a like. If you guys have any questions or comments regarding anything that I mentioned on today's podcast, make sure to go and leave in the comments for sure. But I'll get into it. I want to mention this as well because this is something that I've recently done, and I've recently unconsciously done, which is something that's very, very good, I would say. This is going to be in order to become a better conversationalist, you must observe things within your life, and you must be able to learn it as if you could teach it later on. So there's certain things that I've read recently that I feel like I can truly create relevance to the conversation that I'm having with certain people. This is something that I would recommend for anybody. If you want to be truly interesting and a better conversationalist, let's just say you were to understand a social event that's happening, or maybe you just read something, or maybe you just seen something that is socially relevant, right? Your ability to bring that within a conversation and actually make it relevant to the conversation that's being had, even whether it is about that topic or not, that's gonna be a good sign that you're in the right direction when it comes to bettering your speech and bettering your conversation, right? You're going to be able to take certain things that you've learned and almost teach them in a way, right? And I've honestly been able to do this plenty and plenty of times with whatever book that I'm reading, whenever I'm reading a book. Um, and your ability to do that, like I said, is going to say a lot about your ability to make conversation for sure, for sure. But yes, observe things within life from a lens in which that you will have to teach later on, because there's a lot of things you can just observe and just be like, okay, whatever. You'll never mention it again. It'll just be something that you take for yourself. But your ability to, like I said, bring that to relevance within conversation, you're gonna be on a different level, man. Because truly, I don't see a lot of people doing that. Right? There's very rare occasions where I see somebody doing that and completely taking something that's completely out there and making it relevant. That's something that is very very rare for sure. But getting into the next thing, this is gonna be this is gonna go hand in hand with the kind of the socialization of a conversation, right? This is going to be, you need to understand what conversations to avoid having with certain people, or maybe like I said, it's not exactly as timely as you would like, but you need to understand these things very very thoroughly. There's going to be certain conversations that you're going to have with men that you're truly not going to have with women. There's going to be certain conversations that you have with women that you're truly not going to have with men, right? Now, knowing what those conversations specifically are, maybe you have to write them down. Maybe you can just be in the moment and actually consciously think about these things and say, this could potentially lead this specific way, but I'm not gonna have that conversation because I know better than that, right? That's gonna be an element for sure, for sure. And so, I feel like some people are gonna be like, "What the hell are you talking about, champ? What are you talking about, man? You either know or you don't know, man. That's all I'm gonna say, man." There's gonna be certain conversations, like I had mentioned, right? There's gonna be certain conversations that you're gonna have with men, and men will be able to accept you for what it is, and be okay with that conversation. And maybe if you take that same conversation and you bring it to a group full of women, they're gonna literally destroy you for having that opinion, or for bringing that into conversation, right? And this is vice versa. If you have a certain conversation with women, right, and it goes very very well, and maybe if you try to bring that same type of conversation to a group of men, maybe it's not going to bode well for you. Maybe they're going to think you're a social outcast, and from there you need to just be conscious enough to recognize what is relevant and what is truly not relevant, and what are the conversations that are truly worth avoiding. um, and I feel like everybody's gonna be like, well, there's no way that you cannot have a conversation with somebody. Truly, for the sake of everybody, I'm gonna say there's gonna be certain situations where you need to avoid yourself from having certain conversations. That's all I'm gonna say, man. There's gonna be certain conversations you're gonna have with the boys that you would never have with a stranger. There's gonna be certain conversations you have with your girl that you would never talk to your boys about. Like that's just what it is. That's what it is at the end of the day, man. But your ability to do that is gonna say a lot about you being socialized and being a good conversationalist for sure. You know when to pick and choose your battles, and you know when not to make somebody mad, and when they could potentially be mad, because that's pretty much what it comes down to, right? Some conversations comes with people's skills, and some people lack people skills, and it's hard for them to hold a longer conversation or long conversation, especially with strangers. Overall, good podcast. Appreciate it. I appreciate it, Sarah. But yeah, I would definitely have to agree with that for sure. There's going to be people that lack the conversation skills, but nonetheless, this is why I'm making a podcast for those certain type of people who truly lack. And I would say most people unfortunately do lack, and that's okay. Well, that's okay because truly they can become better. That's why I'm talking about it today. But for the people that don't, for the people who are really not good at creating conversation, you need to recommend certain pieces of information that would be truly beneficial to their life. This would truly be one of those. At least hopefully that's what I would like to think. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say for that. Give me 1 second. All right. Getting you to the next specific point. When it comes to becoming a better conversationalist, you must be present and in the moment when you're having a certain type of conversation. If you're a person who's thinking about other things while having a conversation, I do believe some people can truly sense this vibe, that you're not exactly all there, that you're thinking about something else. Maybe you're consumed about something else, or maybe you're on your phone. Let's just say somebody's trying to have a deep conversation with you and you're on your phone. You're distracted. People are not going to want to have conversation with people like that. And if you're a person that truly wants to be a better conversationalist, you need to know when to put away the certain distractions, and hopefully know your weaknesses enough to avoid them in situations in which you need to go ahead and avoid them. So like, let's just say you're a person who likes to go on their phone just like everybody else, right? Somebody's trying to have a deep conversation with you, you get a text. Instead of picking up your phone and ruining the conversation that you're having, be present in the moment and say, hey, I can void myself from this because I'm having a good conversation right now, and I would hate for this person to feel disrespected because I'm picking up my phone instead of attentively listening to them as I should be, right? Just little things like that go a long way, and I feel like a lot of people, they don't even think about this, but there's certain things like, okay, for example, right? This is gonna be one example. I'm not gonna call out anybody in specific, but if you've done it on the podcast, then you're an L. That's what I'm gonna say. If we're having, let's just say you're on the podcast with me, right? You need to be present in the moment. If I see anybody that comes on the podcast that goes on their phone, I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're not present in the moment. Why are you shifting your focus? I've had it happen a few times on the podcast. And here's the thing: you watching this right now, if you see somebody on the podcast, or if you watching this or on a future podcast, if you go on your phone, I'm gonna call you out straight up. I'm gonna be like, get off your phone. Like we're having a conversation right now, and it should never even get to that point. But at the end of the day, I want somebody who's gonna be having conversations with me, who's going to be present and in the moment. And if you're not, then what's the point of even having the conversation? You might as well just go do whatever you're gonna do, and I'll go ahead and do whatever I'm gonna do, right? But it's only been a few situations where I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing right now, man? What are you doing? That's fine. That's fine. Like I said, if you have permission to go on your phone, that's fine. If it's relevant to the conversation, that's okay. That's okay. But if you're a person that is trying to respond to somebody's text when we're doing a podcast, what are you doing? Like you're not doing something right, truly. And that goes hand in hand with just regular conversation in general, right? If we're having a deep conversation and you go on your phone, automatically I'm already kind of put in like a little bit of a defensive and reserve mode automatically. It's unconscious. It's an unconscious shift. I automatically don't want to be as open, and I'm automatically not as comfortable as I was, as opposed to when you were on your phone, or when you were off your phone rather. So I'm pretty sure I'm speaking for everybody, right? If you're a person that's watching this right now, I want you to go ahead and leave in the comments. If somebody's getting distracted, or maybe somebody's not exactly fully present in the moment, you can tell they're kind of drifting off within thought. Do you even want to have a conversation with people like that? Answer in the comments, man. Because for me, the second I can kind of see that is the second where I'm just kind of like, bro, there's just no point. There's no point. Why would I do that? I'll wait for some comments, and then I'll go ahead and move on to the next point. I have a few more points, and then I'm gonna go and end it off. But appreciate everyone for stopping by. Like I said, if you're new here, make sure you go to subscribe and leave a like, and make sure you go ahead and follow me on TikTok as well. Just Life of a Champ podcast on TikTok. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Gio, appreciate for tapping in, man. Exactly. You wouldn't want to hold a conversation because you would want their full undivided attention depending on the conversation. And I would say most conversations that are not super surface level conversations, those are going to be conversations where you're going to need somebody's full undivided attention. Hold up, man. Obviously not basically talking to yourself. Exactly. I feel like it makes me feel dumb. If I'm having a conversation with you and you're not engaged within the conversation, it makes me feel dumb. It makes me feel less than. It makes me feel, in my opinion, disrespected. Truly. So you got to know when to pick your battles. And of course, I probably have done this to somebody in the past, right? I don't exactly, it's definitely not the best thing that I've ever done. That's for damn sure. It's something that I try to go ahead and avoid as much as I possibly can as well. But nonetheless, you need to be a person that's going to be engaged within a conversation. If you want people to view you as a better conversationalist unconsciously, most people are not going to be like, "Damn, that person's a good conversationalist." But if you but if you want somebody to observe you as a person who's worthy of having conversation with, the one way you can do that is by being present in the moment. Don't be distracted, and you're going to be in a good position for sure. It depends, because if they're like, this is my kid, I gotta take this, then you gotta do your. But here's the thing: that's gonna be only certain situations. It's not gonna be like, wow, that dude's an asshole for attending to his kids, right? Like, there's gonna be certain occasions where it's actually it's okay. But I'll say most of the time it's truly not okay. It's truly not conducive to having a good conversation. And if you're a person that truly wants to have a good conversation, you must avoid these things at all costs. And of course, like AJ had mentioned, there's gonna be certain things, but I feel like that kind of goes without saying. I don't necessarily need to bring that up. All right. Let's see. What did Jaden say? But I feel like if they're genuinely interested in the convo, they wouldn't do that at all. And she's exactly right. If you're genuinely interested in a conversation, you're not going to go on your phone during the conversation. You're not going to you're not going to divide your attention to something else that isn't exactly as presently relevant as the conversation that you're having in the current moment. And that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to a level of disinterest. And of course, there's going to be certain situations like AJ had mentioned where you're going to need to go ahead and, go ahead and handle your life outside of the conversation. That's completely fine. But nonetheless, I'm going to be just like everybody else who's going to want to have an engaging conversation with somebody who's truly present in the moment as opposed to not. So if they are, then they're probably not into it. Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right, Jaden. You're exactly right. Getting into the next thing, in order to become a better conversationalist, and this is something that I have done time and time again, and something that I will continue to do as long as I do podcasts, which is going to be pretty much forever. This is going to be you must become painfully aware of your speech insufficiencies and go ahead and consciously try to change them. Now, there's going to be certain things that I said, let's just say in the first 50 podcasts that I no longer say right now, right? My ability to flow within conversation has obviously evolved over me having, 146 podcasts. And with that being said, if you're a person that obviously doesn't do a podcast, which most of you watching this probably don't do a podcast, you must be conscious and aware when you are having conversation with somebody and you say things that maybe aren't particularly good, keeping people in conversation. Maybe this is the ums. I'm a victim of the ums for sure. Maybe it's exactly. See, it's a process of thinking and pending, but nonetheless, you must be painfully aware of these certain things within your speech, and go from there. Because truly, you can change these things, and you should be wanting to change these things because these things are going to make you a better conversationalist. But at the same time, yes, you must be painfully aware. Truly, that's what it comes. That's what it's going to come down to. But yes, I'm sure everyone watching this right now has a certain type of speech insufficiency or a little bit of a crutch that they use within conversation. But nonetheless, you need to figure out how to go about that. You need to avoid it as much as you possibly can. And I don't even know if I have any specific advice, but just most people don't want to listen to themselves. So I guess you could say that's something I guess that's relevant, but just figure it out, man. Just figure it out. At the very least, if you're a person that wasn't, so conscious of your insufficiencies within conversation, hopefully moving forward, when you say something that you don't particularly like or particularly like to hear within somebody else's speech, or that you find it awkward or you find it, not engaging, hopefully you can change that within yourself and then you're going to be in a better position. At the very least, hopefully you're more conscious. Or okay, let me give you another one. So let's just say you say repeated phrases. I'm also a victim of this, and if you watched me on this, you've obviously probably either have not noticed it at all, and maybe I'm making this more relevant to you as well. It is what it is. At the end of the day, everyone's a victim of this for sure. But yes, the ums, the there's going to be certain phrases that I like to use, so therefore I go ahead and excessively use them. And everybody does this. If you have a conversation enough with somebody, you're going to recognize that they do certain things. And what's interesting, this is going to be, strictly to me through my own personal observations of me doing 146 podcasts, is there's certain things that I use on the podcast that I don't even use in regular conversation. And I find that interesting because it's a different level of conversation, I'd say. But hey, hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. You live with it. But yeah, just be more painfully aware of these certain things, and hopefully you can consciously correct them. And if you weren't aware of your insufficiencies, hopefully you're now aware of your insufficiencies. This is part of the reason why I make the podcast, is because everybody has insufficiencies, and everybody should be striving to go ahead and make themselves better. Because if you don't recognize your insufficiencies, you can never know the problems in which you need to go ahead and fix. So yeah. All right, I already kind of mentioned that one. Okay, I'll give you some more advice when it comes to being a better conversationalist, and this is going to go hand in hand with just being a better speaker in general. One recommendation that I always recommend, and something that I recommend within my how to get better at speech podcast. This is going to be recording yourself, whether this is you speaking in a video, or maybe this is you speaking on audio. You can record your audio most of the time on most phones. And with that being said, if you're able to do this and observe certain things, you might be able to learn things about your speech, certain habits that you do, certain tendencies that you go ahead and fall for that you can go ahead and, hopefully change later on. And then one thing I want to mention with this as well, this is going to be something that I'm going to recommend specifically. Let's just say you want to go ahead and film yourself, right? I'd recommend you go ahead and pick a topic that you're decently well versed on, and at the very least, if you're not well versed on it, hopefully you give yourself enough time to think about it before you actually go ahead and speak about it. And then go ahead and set up a camera or set up your phone, whatever it is, click record, and talk about it as long as you possibly can. When you do think about it, you want to think about all the potential conversations or the potential ways the conversation can move. And if you're able to do this, you're going to be in a good position when it comes to in bettering your speech. If you're going to be a person who's going to be better at speaking, you're going to be a person who's truly better at having conversation, for sure. But yes, do this, and I'm going to recommend it forever because truly not enough people do this, right? I'm a person who didn't truly recognize the utility until I actually did it myself and have done it for almost 2 years now. So yeah, I would definitely say going back, watch those certain videos, trying to better yourself, and trying to take the time to truly better yourself, right? It's one of the most essential skills that exists, man. If you're a person that's going to be, if you want to be a person that's truly, like the people in my background, right? These people are going to be people who have truly elevated their speech, and maybe they recorded themselves, maybe they didn't. But at the very least, if you want to be a person who's going to be better at this essential skill within life, you need to take the time and make it better yourself, because you can do it. I hate seeing myself talk. Yeah, I see some. Yeah, hey Jay, it is what it is, man. It is what it is. And I would say, unfortunately, most people, they have that same paradigm where they hate seeing themselves talk. But at the very least, maybe there's something there. Maybe by you not, liking the way in which you speak, maybe there's something there. I'll say that. All right. With that being said, this is gonna be, I guess, this is good. This is gonna help indirectly. Like I said, I already mentioned early on in the podcast that there's going to be certain things that I'm going to recommend for you to go ahead and do that's indirectly going to affect your speech. And one of these things is going to be writing. I'm a person who does this within my own notes. I don't actually sit down and write. I should, but it's not something that I truly make time for. And with that being said, writing is an extension of thought and speech, and obviously an extension of thought and speech is going to be conversation. With that being said, if you're able to develop your own ideas and kind of figure out specifically how your mind works a little bit better than what you did before you wrote, you're going to be in a good position to indirectly affect the way in which you have conversation and your ability to have certain levels of conversation. So, like I'd mentioned, if you're a person that's trying to make any type of improvement at all and trying to take any and everything that you possibly can, being a person who writes is going to put you in a good position for sure, for sure. And yeah, I already mentioned that one. Also, a few more things. In order to be a better conversationalist, this is something that I'm not very good at. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's something I'm trying to get better at. But the only way you get better at it is by having the conversations. This is going to be to slow down your speech. I'm a person who speaks very, very quickly because my mind is going very, very quickly. And with that being said, if you're able to slow down your speech truly, you're hopefully able to get all your thoughts across in a way that people can truly internalize. There's a lot of things that I say on this podcast. I'm just trying to get everything that's within my brain to my actual mouth, and by doing that, it's obviously going to go a little quick. But if you're a person that speaks slowly, you're doing a good job. If you're a person who speaks very, very quickly, then hopefully from now on, try to speak a little bit more slow. And if you're able to do this, you're going to be in a good position to be a better conversationalist for sure. But yeah, another thing you can do, this is something that I mentioned a little bit earlier. This is going to help you become a better conversationalist. This is going to be observe great speakers who came before you and figure out what they're specifically good at. So maybe this is the Joe Rogans of the world. He's not great, but he's pretty damn good, better than most people. Maybe this is the Jordan Petersons of the world. Maybe it's an intellectual. Maybe it's a rapper. Maybe it's a comedian. A lot of those people are very good at speaking, and nonetheless, you should try your best to go ahead and observe specifically what they do good and try to emulate them, like I mentioned early on in the podcast. Jaden is on one. She's on one. Yeah, you're exactly right. What Lil Wayne said, you're not talking fast, they're just listening slow. And that's exactly what it is, man. That's exactly what it is. I've had people tell me, hey, champ, slow down. No, my guy, you need to keep up, man. You need to keep up. You're lagging right now. But yeah, she's exactly right. She's exactly right. Anthony, I'm sure Anthony's told me that before, for sure, for sure. But you just got to keep up. You just got to keep up. That's what it comes down to. But yeah, very funny though. Getting into it. Yeah, I'll mention this. So I went to a Jordan Peterson conference. If you know who Jordan Peterson is, shout out to you. If you don't know who Jordan Peterson is, he's going to be one of the best speakers of this time, in my opinion. And I think potentially he is the best speaker. He's up for debate for the best speaker of this specific time that exists right now. With that being said, I went to one of his what do they call it? It's almost like a seminar. It's what was it called, man? I'm just gonna call it a seminar, right? Basically, it was him speaking about his journey, his book that just came out recently, and with that being said, he's a person who understands that people need help when it comes to their own speech. He's a person that's done it for like 40 years. I'm not. I wish I did it for about 40 years because I'd be definitely way better. But with that being said, he said certain things that make people really good at conversation is animated speech, which is basically going to be using your hands. This is something that I don't do enough and something that I need to be more conscious of. But there's going to be certain times in which you need to do it and certain times in which you don't need to do it for sure. But being very animated with your speech is definitely going to help people become and stay engaged within the conversation. With that being said, also taking pauses as well, because pauses aren't always awkward. You need to take pauses to think. And you'll see some of the greatest speakers, they do this. They'll speak and then they'll stop and then they'll continue to speak again because it allows them to avoid using the ums, right? I just use it as a personal filler because truly I'm trying to load in the game and truly just finish what I'm trying to think. But yes, taking pauses that aren't exactly particularly awkward, in which you can feel comfortable with, you can control the pace of the conversation by taking these pauses for sure. And also, with that being said, something else that he mentioned. This is something that he does time and time again. This is going to be gauging your audience and a person's attention. Like I said, these are going to add into the social cues that I'd mentioned earlier. With that being said, if you're talking to a group of people, recognize the certain facial expressions, recognize eye contact, recognize if they're attentive, recognize if they're shifting or diverting their focus in a different way. Maybe they're on their phone, maybe they're not engaged. Right, being able to do that's going to be very very key as well, and also being able to gauge somebody's actual attention as well is definitely going to be very very key because if they're not truly engaged, then it might be better to not say anything at all. You'll be the next Jordan Peterson, most likely better. Exactly. Appreciate it, Jaden. Appreciate it. I try my best out here. The only way I can do it is by having these podcasts. That's for sure. I like to use to be able to continue speaking and give myself time to think. Some people like to start talking when you take a break. Exactly. But also it also depends on, how good you are actually having conversations. There's going to be certain conversation that you're going to be able to have or people are going to respect the way in which you speak, where they'll literally be attentive to the point where they'll avoid saying as much as they possibly can because they want to hear truly what you have to say. And yeah, you're exactly right. I do the same thing. I like using as well because it gives myself time to think, and it's nothing more than a filler. I kind of don't want to have awkward pauses, so that's why I use a filler. That's truly what it is. When it comes down to it, that's pretty much what it comes down to. I already mentioned that point, so I'm not going to mention that point again. I guess I can. All right, getting back into it. Before I go and end it off, I'm going to mention this last specific point. This is something that I mentioned earlier on, but nonetheless, I think needs to be mentioned once more. This is going to be inclusive with your speech and also engage your listener by bringing them along the journey when it comes to what you're speaking on. So, like I had mentioned earlier, there's going to be certain things you can engage. So, for example, the way that I would do it on this podcast is by talking about a specific point, bringing something that I personally liked and resonated with me within the comments, and then I talk about it within my own personal point. So I take a point that somebody else had made, and I make it a part of my own point. If you're able to do this, people are going to recognize that you're listening and paying attention, and that's going to be very much valued for sure. With that being said, yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say. You must engage the ideas of others in your own specific thought, and you're going to be in a good position for sure. But other than that, hopefully you took something from this podcast. If you've taken nothing from this podcast, then you're probably already professional, and you probably should have a podcast yourself. So that's what I'll say for that. But most people could definitely take at least one thing from this podcast. So if you're a person that has taken something from this podcast, Whether you're watching this or watching this live, make sure to leave in the comments. It would definitely be much appreciated. And is there anything else I want to say for today? I said pretty much everything I needed to say. This one went a little bit longer than I anticipated, but nonetheless, hopefully you guys got some value from this for sure. Because I definitely had got some value from this just by speaking about it. So definitely thankful for that. But a few things I want to mention before I go and end it off. I'll be potentially having a live stream later today, which will be about music. There's this artist. He's in the background. He's not too popular, but if you know him, then you know him. If you don't, then you don't. But he's potentially releasing an album tonight. He's actually right above me, right? These ones right here. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, then you don't know. But with that being said, if you like his music and want to potentially listen to the music with me from my first listen, definitely tap in with that for sure. I don't even know who that is. Me neither. I just got these because I think they just look cool. So it's simple as that. But hopefully you took something from this. And one thing I want to mention as well, I think I'm gonna talk about this as well. The reason why I like kind of making podcasts about these certain types of ideas is because recently I came to a conclusion of my own personal thought. This is something that I haven't exactly mentioned within a podcast before, but nonetheless, this is something that has definitely been on my mind. Is I have this, how do I want to put it? I have this fascination with articulation of words, thoughts, and speech. And this is why I had the podcast in the first place, is because these things have always interested me for the longest time. I've always admired and truly was inspired by people who were able to do this at a high level, whether it was artists, whether this was musicians, whether this was speakers, podcasters, right? A lot of these types of people who are very, very good and very articulate. I've always been a person who's truly wanted to be exactly like them. And with that being said, this is why I do the podcast, man. So if anybody ever asks you, if you get a question, say, do you know why Champ does the podcast? Champ loves to have a good conversation, and he has a fascination with articulation of speech, thoughts, and words. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. But other than that, I just wanted to mention that because, quite frankly, I do believe it is relevant. And yeah, at the end of the day, become a better conversationalist. If you're a person that needs to become better at conversation, like I said, or if you see somebody that truly needs to be better at conversation, who's truly lacking, who truly wants to go ahead and better themselves within their conversation, recommend them this podcast, man, because truly we need a lot of people on this because unfortunately there's still a lot of people lacking their ability to have good level conversation. And that's just what it is at the end of the day. But other than that, I appreciate everyone for stopping by. Like I said, tap in with the live stream. Potentially, if I go live, I'll be going live in 45 minutes. God damn. We'll see what's good. We'll see what's good, man. But if you see me live, tap in. If you don't see me live, then he ain't drop it, man. That's all I'm gonna say. Other than that, you have a good rest of your night. Tap in with the podcast is going to be on Tuesday. This upcoming week, I should have a few guests on, so definitely stay tuned in for that for sure. If there's a specific idea that you want me to go ahead and talk about on a future podcast, I definitely want you to go ahead and leave in the comments, whether you're watching this or watching this live. Definitely let me know. I would definitely love to hear your guys' specific ideas on things in which you think I might have a good insight on. Other than that, y'all have a good rest of your night, and I'll leave you guys off with the podcast motto. The first thing I want to say, this was episode 146 of the Life of a Champ podcast, talking about how to become a better conversationalist. I'll leave you guys off with the podcast motto. Fellas out here, man, we don't just work around here, man. We outwork. So make sure y'all working these motherfuckers because you know that I am, man. Come on now. You already know what time it is, man. But other than that, like I said, tap in with the next podcast on Tuesday. Should have a few wonderful guests on. But other than that, you guys have a good rest of your night and tap in with the live stream potentially. Y'all have a good night, man.